Hi, I'm Dick Sutphen, and I'm glad you joined me today. And we're going to be talking about a lot of metaphysical things. So I'm glad you joined us, and we'll be right back. When Anna and I were first talking about the idea of doing the seminar, and what would she like, because I've got a lot of seminars I do that are just basically already blocked out, and she said, well, she wanted to go through the psychic preview to look, for what is happening upcoming for the next 5 years, and that we agreed on. And she said, I'd like to include healing techniques. And do you have anything that is related to Atlantis, going back to Atlantis? And boy, do I have stuff that goes back to Atlantis. So, this is a very eclectic seminar for these 2 days we've got together. This is going to be a very unusual mix. But I haven't even taught you about what all I'm planning on doing here. That yeah, but it might be good. We coordinate. But so I'm going to. We've got about a half hour before they start to bring in the food. I understand, and then maybe a little while for them to get it set up. But what I would like to do is talk about Atlantis, because I've been investigating this one forever. And I would like to maybe do a past life regression back to Atlantis. You okay with that? Cool?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That was an easy sell. Thank you. So, we'll do that. And then Atlantis, now I'd like you to look, and I'm going to have to talk about it ahead of time, so you could say, well, I'm programming you, but I feel that when I ask you questions, and you'll see whatever there is to see from your perspective of Atlantis. And I want to look at the healing techniques that were used on Atlantis. But if you listen to Edgar Casey, to other researchers, Atlantis lasted for 100,000 years. So that's almost inconceivable. I mean, what are we? 200 and some years, and we seem to be having a hard time keeping it together. So, but 100,000 years. And all that Edgar Casey talked about on Atlantis was the last 25,000 years. So that seems to be by far the most important time. And before that, I think it was people coming here and they were experimenting with life form. They were crossing out of spirit into the manifest world. And that tends to explain some of the things that I have received from people, because they are tapping in on all these different periods of time over which Atlantis evolved. Now, Anna was explaining to me too, when you guys were starting to share back and forth, she said, Richard, a lot of these people they don't know what you're talking about when you talk about chakras. And they don't know what you're talking about with past lives. And so I didn't really realize this, but catch me if you want to ask any question. But put up your hand and I'll try to answer it, because I assume that most New Agers, are already there, and that's a faulty assumption on my part. So I don't want to leave anybody behind. But Atlantis is everybody, let me say this, everybody here, I would bet anything, has had lifetimes after lifetimes after lifetimes on Atlantis. It was a highly evolved society, and we kind of like the vibration, really, of Atlantis. And so we're back again, for sure, to want to be here now. And Atlantis broke up over 3 time periods, over an awful lot of time. And the last time it broke up was around 10,000 years ago. Now, I could talk about all the evidence and on and on and on, and we'd really get hung up on all of that. But I believe that there was a major cataclysm about 10,000 years ago. And it did not just include Atlantis, but Atlantis went down. It fell into the sea. And it was the 3rd time there had been a major disruption, major earthquakes. And so already the people on Atlantis were going to different parts of the world, and a lot of them went to the Mayan area. I wrote a whole book on Teotihuacan, my soul history with Teotihuacan in Mexico, outside of Mexico City. And that was an amazing society. It isn't that well known. It's not in the history books to the degree that Rome is. But it would have rivaled Rome in its grandeur and its scope. Absolutely rivaled Rome. When they started to build Teotihuacan, they just basically paved 25 square miles, and they built this beautiful, beautiful city. The Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon are the 2 major buildings that are just these incredible pyramids. And so I had past lives there. Excuse me, my wife Tara had a past life there at the same time. And so we had a lot of fun initially just investigating Teotihuacan and realizing that the heritage went back to Atlantean times. And then there's incredible evidence that where the Atlanteans moved to Egypt and became what we think of as the Egyptian society. But 10,000 years ago, a lot of the world was underwater. And the Sphinx, for example, in Egypt, is much, much older than any of the rest of the buildings that exist there. And they say there is evidence, very blatant evidence, that the Sphinx was underwater at one time. And it dates back, everything that they can date it with, it dates back around 10,000 years. So the rest of the building of Egypt, the magnificent structures and all, are again echoes, evidently, of Atlantis. And the Sphinx, maybe the people copied the Sphinx in creating a lot of the attire, the magnificent costumes or attire that they wore, and the building of the pyramids and the rest of the structures that were part of it. So Atlantis spread out after it went down. And it spread out, and the people migrated all around the world. But we are all ex-Atlanteans. We are still influenced, I'm sure, by what happened there. Barbara Ann Clow writes a great deal about the catastrophe of Atlantis, and that we're still in fear of that sort of thing again. So, I started when I was first learning hypnosis work, and I was living in Scottsdale, Arizona at the time, and established a hypnosis center in Scottsdale. And oftentimes I had friends who were teachers in the local schools. Now, you couldn't do this today. they'd burn you at the stake. But in those days, they'd say, well, come on in and regress my students, and let's, it'd be fun. And I did. And nobody said anything. Nowadays, a very different story, as you know. But what I would do oftentimes is I would take them back to a lifetime on Atlantis, because the chances are they'd never heard of it. And we just see what they got. So I'd say, well, there's this place called Atlantis. It probably existed. And let's go back and see what you get. And so I would take classes of students back, and I'd regress them back to Atlantis. And they'd come back and they would tell me all the things I was already aware of. And so there's the possibility that I was projecting to them, but I don't think so. Because they'd always be telling me brand new things about what life was like on Atlantis. And I remember it kept coming up that there was a time when they were all connected. In other words, everybody was psychically connected to everyone else on Atlantis. So when we go back in time here, either right before lunch or right after, there's a possibility that you too could tap into that. The probability is probably very low. But there was a time when people were connected, but they reported, they had to disconnect because the connection was being misused. Now that sounds a little bit like today, We'd be all connected and somebody would find a way to insert commercials into the connection or something. And so, they had to disconnect. And they said, well, we've all had to disconnect. And it's very lonely, was often the way they stated it. But Atlantis seems to have been a highly evolved society. Like we are evolved, very much. But they did things differently. If you care to believe it, there was air travel. But what they did, from what I've gathered in talking with a lot of people, hypnotizing them, doing individual past life regressions very often with them, to fly, they simply reversed gravity. They found a way to reverse gravity, so they were able to fly very naturally. I don't know if they were able to do things at the speed we do them today, but it was part of what they did. There are some wonderful things written. They're channeled material, but I remember one, Philos. If there's any of the writings on Atlantis by Philos, a young boy around the turn of the century was not a good student. And so, is this a... Oh, I see. Okay. Parents, they encouraged him, you've got to write, you've got to do your schoolwork. And he just would not do his schoolwork. But all of a sudden, he started doing schoolwork, and he was writing this incredible material. And it's all out. One book is a dweller on 2 planes or 2 planets, and another one, well, if you just look up Philos, P-H-Y-L-O-S, I believe that's how you spell it, on Amazon, why, any of the books that are in print, or previously were in print, why, I'd suggest, if you're interested in this, it's an incredible read, because it's channeled by a 15-year-old kid. Didn't know what he was writing, but he wrote it in great, great detail, and it ties in with everything I've ever found in all the regressive work. So, let's see, what's some of the other? I've got quick notes here. We did a whole seminar just on Atlantis last year. And always central to the Atlantean time is the use of crystals. It's just echoed all of the time in one way or another in all the regressions I've done. And it seems that they probably had, now this is getting very far out. Some of you who are wondering what you got into in coming here is now probably really going to wonder what you got into. So you can blame Nana. You're welcome.
Or credit her.
Yes.
Credit her.
Yes. Credit. Yeah. Okay. Okay. But in going back, it's probably very evident that they did have extraterrestrial help. Now, I hesitate to even say such things. In my book called Earthly Purpose on Teotihuacan, and a lot about that has been proven about Teotihuacan, there was nothing on this at the time we did all of the work. A lot of the people, it's about 250 people wrote that book. And I regressed in all the seminars I was doing for a couple of years. I'd always include a Teotihuacan regression session. And so I had an immense amount of material. Anybody who was willing to do so, I had them fill out some sheets about the city. And a lot of these people reported the extraterrestrial help. And I thought, oh no, I'm just not into that. I don't want that in the book. And everybody that was, reading any part of it, or those who did the regressions, or my editor, they all said, well, if there's that many people that saw it, you should put it in. And I didn't want to, but I did. I did put it in. And the book was a story of people that lived around 850 AD. And it was what today I would think would be a very metaphysical society. It's not so dramatic when you look at the world events, but the father who was ruling at the time, he was very metaphysically oriented. And when he died, his two sons took over, and they were very militarily oriented. And so they saw that what they had to do was get rid of the priestcraft, basically, the metaphysical structure. And they did. They got rid of them. And the way they handled it, and finally, was that they threw the 200 primary members, people in power that were, be like the priests who were sharing all of these ideas, in a pit, and they just buried them. 200 people in a big pit. Well, some of the people that were helping me with the book said, well, there's no evidence of anything like that happening. And I agreed. But if you want me to put in extraterrestrials, I'm going to put this in, because a lot of people got it in past life regression. And 2 years after the book was published by Simon & Schuster Pocketbooks, a dig being led by the University of Arizona uncovered 200 bodies in a pit. And they couldn't figure out what in the world had happened. Many newspaper stories at the time. So we wrote the ending of this transition of power well before it was known, anything was known by the archaeologists that could not fit the pieces together. So this was wonderful verification. And if everybody was accurate on that, well, maybe everybody was accurate in regard to the extraterrestrials as well. So the Atlanteans came to that part of the world, obviously. And it is said that they drew upon extraterrestrial help to find a vein of crystal in a mountain that was so big that they were able to extract it from the mountain and carve all the facets that they're basically there, but to do all of what they had to do to adjust it to be this giant receiver, this giant method of, it became a point where ships and air travel and all could tap into the beam and just be drawn home or sent out. So you always hear, and you will probably tap in upon, the crystals. But there was one great crystal that evidently was just huge. So at the time Atlantis broke up, it fell into the sea. And supposedly the area they were would be right around the Bermuda Triangle. And so there is theory that this tapping into the energy of the Bermuda Triangle, actually what that amounts to is this huge crystal from Atlantean times. And it's still active. It's under the sea, but it is still doing what it does. And you've seen all the History Channel, Discovery Channel, and so on, all the shows about how many hundreds and hundreds of people have disappeared at that point. There are 4 primary energy centers on the earth. Now, Sedona is one of them. And there seems to be, a couple of them are positive and a couple of them are negative. The Bermuda Triangle would appear to be fairly negative. The positive, the other negative would be in Sussex, England. And then you have Sedona, Arizona, and you have the area over in Kauai and Waimea Canyon, and that would be positive as well. So the crystals come in a great deal whenever I'm asking someone, if you know of the healing temples, if you need help when you go to the doctor, as we would perceive a doctor, what happens? What do they use to heal you? And the one thing that comes up again and again and again is the vibration chambers and the color healing. Color healing and vibration. Now, today, Patty Conklin, I don't know how many people in here have heard of her, but she's a dear friend, one of my very best friends in the world. She lives down in Stone Mountain, Georgia, because God sent her there. Don't ask, but they sent her to Stone Mountain, Georgia. And Patty says there's only 2 ways to really heal. It's vibration and color. And so we have had a lot of conversations about this. When I ask people to perceive what you might be experiencing when it comes to healing, they will describe being in an enclosure and there are vibrating discs above them. And evidently the priests or whoever is controlling it are able to control the vibration for an individual to experience that intense vibration being under these vibrating discs that you need to heal what the patient needs to be healed. And the more we're finding out now about vibrational medicine, read the books on that, do a Google search on that. There are dozens of books on vibrational medicine. It's just being talked about, but it's been around for quite a while, but it's just being, I think, it's going to come to the fore, and it'll become one of the ways that we are healed in time. Color healing, I've got I don't know if we have it here, but a color therapy CD, the people just get back to me and they report amazing things, because it talks about immersing yourself in the color that you need for healing, and to use that as a part of your healing regime. Now, there are a lot of things you can do, but boy, use them all. Use everything you can get. And Patty Conklin, I didn't know this at the time, and she didn't know about my healing, the things I'd recorded and talked about. But she uses a technique of what she calls colorworks. And she would say, every night, if you want to be really productive and serve yourself very well, you simply lie there in bed as you're going to sleep and you say, what color do I need at this time to heal my body or bring up the energy of my body? And then you imagine that color coming in the soles of your feet and moving it up through your body. And Patty says, don't be afraid of the blacks and the browns, colors like that, which people normally would stay away from. It's that dense vibration that you may need to pull through your body to help you at this time with this particular problem. All right. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope you'll be back when we're going to be doing future shows. So, until next time, goodbye.